Are we live? We are live. What is happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Sunday, kind of a rarity, a rare Sunday show. A little bit off schedule. Normally, we go live around 9 to 9:30 on Tuesdays and Saturdays, but the schedule's been a little bit janky. So we're going to go live tonight and then see if we can't somehow or another get back on a normal schedule coming into next week. Fingers crossed. I ain't gonna promise nothing just yet, but we might get there. So here's the thing, guys. This is something that's come up a couple of times, and it's certainly come up in my life. And I know a lot of you guys and gals have, there's a certain car that you're just dying to get out there and build. There's a certain, it could be anything. It could be an old Mustang. Speed Freak saying, what's up, Speed? It could be an old Mustang. It could be an old Mopar, Camaro, Vet, DeSoto. It could be a lot of different cars, old pickup truck, whatever the case is. Maybe it's a family heirloom. Maybe you've got an uncle that's given it to you as a graduation present, or you got an uncle that just died, and so your dead ancestor wills you this hot rod, or pile of parts in the parking lot of whatever shop or house this thing happens to be in. Look, here's the thing. Just like you guys, everybody has to come to the realization that it can often be a lot more satisfying to want something than it is to actually have something and to go through the processes and the headaches and the expense and everything else when it comes to building this particular vehicle. Again, and it could be anything, not necessarily the late model stuff. This is really more kind of edging towards the classics. But then again, classics are starting to get a little bit more ambiguous. I mean, by all rights, Foxy back here is a classic. So it just kind of depends on your definition. But either way, all the same rules apply. And so I kind of wanted to have a bit of a free-form discussion. First dead Skeeter so far tonight. Over under, by the way, is going to be 2. And we're already halfway through that. So anyway, this rain's really drug them out, which is driving me absolutely crazy. So but what I wanted to do is run you guys through some pitfalls, some of the things that I've run into with Sierra and with Foxy, and some realistic issues that you can potentially run into. And again, this is just like always going to be more freeform. I'll be making my typical stops and starts and answering questions along the way, but primarily this is what the topic is. Should you build the car? If you're thinking about it and you've never had anybody just sit down and talk to you and go, hey, we got to talk about these plans, man, then this is your opportunity. So anyway, let me check in with everybody and then we'll get into the chat. Let's see. Speed Freak saying CFL James got the 2 thumbs up and the arm flex. I like it. Eric Taylor saying, good evening, Fresh Speak. Good evening, Eric. The Sloan says 69 Super B with 540-inch Gen 2 Hemi. All the best with that one. Brent's checking in saying, what up, y'all? Brent saying, I rebuild an 84 Grand National. It took 2 years and I sold it about 2 years later. I won't do another one. I just want to get in and go do small things even now and every now and then. Absolutely. And we're going to be getting into that exact topic here in a minute, Brent. In fact, it's funny you mentioned a Grand National. That's one of the cars that has actually been blowing up lately, both the T-Types and the Grand Nationals. Oddly enough, too, seeing more and more of them at the drag strip along with Fox body stuff. So, again, we're going to be talking about some interesting things that come up, whether it's a classic, and I'm not going to go any further back than 1960s stuff, but you'll get the idea when I start talking about Sierra, and then some of the more modern classics like Fox bodies, 4th gens and things like that. But Habu's checking in and saying, hey, B, and then Kobe saying, what's up, B? What's up, y'all? So let's talk about this for a minute. Now, when we start talking about the older stuff, let's say that you're wanting to build some, roadkill-esque type of a ride that you actually plan on doing anything with other than scrapping it as soon as you're done playing with it in about 4 to 5 months. If you want the thing to actually last and be safe and everything, you're going to have to start replacing practically everything that has anything to do with that particular vehicle being an automobile. And this is where guys really start to screw up. So And again, I'm not trying to shatter anybody's dreams, guys. I just want y'all to understand that there are things that you have to look out for. There's going to be systems that you're going to have to replace, not just parts, but entire systems that you're going to have to replace. And in some cases, have either completely overhauled or rebuilt. So let's just basically get started. A typical car, let's say from the 60s, is now been around, and I can't even believe I'm going to say this, has now been around for about 60 years, 55 to 60 years. That thing has been on this planet. You have to remember that those vehicles really weren't ever engineered to last more than about 5 to 10 years at the most. So when you find one, and we're talking just in normal general conditions, been in and out of a garage, driven here and there, what have you, it will be in a significant state of deterioration. We're talking rust in different panels. We're talking all the body components, all the rubber parts, all of these things are going to have to be replaced if they haven't had them replaced already. And herein lies the first pitfall that you run into. Just because it starts and runs does not mean that it's safe. A lot of guys will get in these things. They'll figure out a way to get it up and running. It is now ambulatory somehow or another through some miracle. And it's actually running around. And of course, this falls in line with a lot of these cars that are typically found or willed, things like that. You get this thing up and running, and now what happens? Well, this is where you find out that things like brake lines fail. Ask me how I know about that. So let me give you a perfect example. Sierra, just sitting in the driveway, thank God it happened like this, but just sitting in the driveway, the front brake lines failed. I replaced the front brake lines. And if you ever saw my Instagram page, you see me bleeding all over the place on this truck. And I also replaced the master cylinder lines as well. All in an effort to just move the thing 5 feet. I go to fire the truck up, put my foot on the brake pedal still goes straight to the floor. And it does so because the rear brake line exploded right where I was freaking working on the truck. So yes, these freaky things do happen with old cars. You will start to believe that they are possessed, and it's very easy to understand how Stephen King got the idea for a possessed car for Christine. So I replaced all the brake lines. Now this is in a 1972 GMC 3/4 ton truck. You would think that it would just be as simple as ordering up a set of brake lines and they go in. But it's not quite the case. There were running line changes and multiple styles for these parts over the years. So what ended up happening was it was making sure that you get the right part to install. That was another fun thing. But now you're trying to install brand new parts on very old, rusty, and crusty parts. Did I happen to mention the thing about rust earlier? It's going to be a predominant theme, so just get used to that. So replace all the brake lines, replace the master cylinder lines. Everything's fantastic. Drive the truck over to the barn, and the truck's sitting for about another couple of weeks, high and dry. Everything's cool. Fire the truck up every once in a while just to hear it run because it sounds so good with those Flowmasters in the H-pipe. And then I walk out to the barn one day, and yeah, lo and behold, it had puked the radiator guts all over the floor. So that was a bit of a problem, as you might imagine. And this radiator had survived driving around, wasn't really showing any signs of leaking, only to basically just disintegrate from sitting there. So I had to replace the radiator. Starting to sound familiar, Foxy? Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that components will fail seemingly randomly for no real apparent reason. If you haven't done your due diligence coming into this, then, and by due diligence, I mean you've replaced the radiator, you've replaced belts, you may just be proactive and replace brake lines. If you don't go about that, then you've got a rolling safety hazard waiting to happen. Now, the later model stuff comes with a little bit better lines. The lines are better, higher quality. You typically don't run into those problems with these later model classics, but the earlier ones, you certainly can. So just be aware of this coming into the proposition of getting into one of these cars. Now, guys, if you haven't noticed yet, I've been talking about cars that have been gifted or willed at this point. In other words, they're gifts. Somebody blesses you with a project, so to speak, or curses you with their old project. I haven't even mentioned anything about buying the car, but we'll get into that probably more towards the tail end of the chat. So anyway, going over key components, radiator, cooling system, any type of anything made out of rubber. That could be body mounts, that could be belts, that could be hoses, could be anything that carries any kind of fluid, brake lines in particular, along with the hard lines, and, oh, by the way, fuel lines. Don't forget that these cars, if they're sitting for any real length of time, those fuel lines sit, they get brittle. If it hasn't been running any real length of time, they start going through a couple of heat cycles and they rupture. Not good. So another thing to consider before you even put that thing into any kind of actual service, regardless of if you got it started and running, all of those systems are going to have to be R&R. In other words, replaced and repaired before you even have a chance to drive the thing. And oh yeah, by the way, if it has been sitting for any real length of time, none of those things are going to want to come off that car or truck. Believe me, they will not leave where they're seated without a fight. So just know that coming into it. You may be replacing even more components because things have rust fused themselves together. And no amount of PB blaster or prayers or four-letter words will make this problem go away. This is a full tear out and replace situation. It happens to happen a lot. And it also happens to happen when the car, vehicle, if you want to call it, truck, whatever, looks pristine. It looks great sitting there. But underneath the surface, it is a basket case. And a lot of guys end up getting caught kind of in the moment. You buy something only to think that you found a great deal, only to discover that every system hasn't been ever touched in years and years, and no maintenance. So let me check in with that real quick. We've covered brakes, we've covered cooling systems. Jimmy's checking in, Kobe's saying, what's up, B? Jimmy said, I'd love to get a hold of an 80s Monty SS. There was a guy down here that had one for sale not too long ago, a silver one. It's really pretty. Mark Corleone's in the house, and Professor Mason got the arm flex. I like it. Jimmy Olsen saying Fox body, 5-lug steering brakes minimum. Yeah, a lot of folks would agree with that. Let's see. Peter saying, I would like to restore my 70 GTX one day. Time and money is my enemy right now. You know, that's not your only enemy, bro, because when you look at it from this point of view, just like what I was talking about with the brake lines, the cooling system, and everything else. And by the way, let's just stop right here. Let's say that you buy a museum piece. Let's say that you buy this jewel that a museum is actually selling. Happens to happen a whole lot, by the way, guys. Remember that that car, if it hasn't been stewarded properly, if it hasn't been run, driven, exercised, and everything else the way that they have to be, then you are looking at replacing every rubber component that you can possibly dream up just because it goes bad from lack of use. That's right, guys. Not only can you blow something up because you've run it too hard, you can actually speed up the deterioration process by letting it sit. So there's that. So even, and this actually happened to me with my C4. My vet had, this was my 94. My vet had 20,000 miles on it. And it was literally a museum car. And when I bought it, I loved the car, but I had to replace basically anything and everything that was rubber. Just because, again, from sitting there, these things do have shelf lives. They have expiration dates. And if those hoses are any older than, say, I don't know, 8 years old, you're probably going to want to replace them. And if they're any older than 10 years old, I'd say it's practically mandatory at that point from a safety standpoint. Speed Freak saying at 46 years old, would go into a turnkey classic. The time, money pit, and problems to build them as you get older is not easy. Yeah, no, I'll agree with that. And like I say, I mean, coming into this conversation, okay, so you touch on an interesting topic, and we're going to get into some of the other things you're going to have to look into: engine, transmission, steering, you know, and whatnot. But turnkey classics, there are shops out there that will build these things for you. But again, when you buy a turnkey classic, make sure that you're buying it from a reputable shop. Do your due diligence. What somebody thinks is a good job might not be what you think is a good job. What somebody thinks is a safe job may not actually be safe at all. A lot of these guys will just basically slap a bunch of Bondo, do a quick respray, make the thing look good from about 3 to 5 feet away, clean up the interior, make the thing serviceable, and then throw it out there for sale. Just understand that if that's what has happened, all of these key components that I'm talking about, again, even if you buy a museum quality piece, you still have to look into these issues for maintenance and repair. So, you know, if you buy a very well refreshed car, make sure that you're asking the questions. Have you replaced the brake lines? Have you replaced the master cylinder lines? What all has actually been replaced as opposed to just freshened up? In other words, if you're buying that kind of a car, you want it to be more or less showroom quality, showroom ready, showroom service ready is really the quote that you're looking for, not just showroom pretty. Because that doesn't even start to answer some of the questions that comes with some of these cars. The Sloan saying, I restored our family 69 CUDA for my brother. Been there, done that. I bought a Hellcat and saved money. Real talk on that one. Anthony G saying, just get in and drive. Jimmy Olsen saying, rusty orange brown radiator vomit. Awesome stuff. Yeah, that was pretty sweet. And but the funny thing about it is so I'm researching radiators. I'm researching all the different parts that I need to get for this thing. Where is that son of a bitch going? I'm researching all the different parts and everything else that I need to get to make the truck right. And as I'm researching them, it's almost like it can read my mind, because as I'm researching the part, it'd fail. So, you know, good times there, right? Let's swap everything. People replace brake lines when nothing is wrong with them, unless going for more braking power. Yeah, actually, people do. As a matter of fact, as a course of, you know, just, I don't know, best practices, a lot of guys will do when you do a brake job on some of these older cars, especially if they've never had the brake lines replaced. After about 30 or 40 years, it's a good idea to go ahead and replace those brake lines, because they can deteriorate. Let's see. Brent saying it's best sometimes to just buy one done or get a new one with more power and a warranty. That's true. Ella's saying, talking about depreciation being upside down as soon as you pull off the lot. Well, yeah, but that can be true if, well, let's talk about that. That brings up another good point. How much are you willing to spend on this dream that you might have? A lot of guys seem to think that, and again, we're still talking about a vehicle that has been gifted to you, not one that you've gone out, hunted down, and bought, but one that's been gifted to you. And that's important for this part of the conversation. If you're going to build something and expect to get any real money out of it, just understand that there's several things you have to look at. One, is the vehicle desirable in the marketplace? 2, how much money and time are you willing to invest into the thing? And 3, what is the car actually going to owe you when you're all said and done? Because it doesn't matter if the market is at, say, $25,000 for the particular vehicle that you're working with. If you have $28,000 in the car, you're $3,000 in the hole just coming into this proposition. And this happens to bite a lot of people in the ass. And so what I've told guys is, look, if you're even contemplating this and you're looking to have a driver, like not a show car, but just a cruiser, something you can go out, light the tires up, get a couple of giggles out of yourself, run, grab a couple of burgers, do whatever, do the cruise nights and what have you, but you're not looking for a show car, then realistically, and again, if you didn't buy the vehicle yourself, you're still going to be about $20,000 to $25,000 deep into this thing before it's all said and done. And before you go, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, let's go through this. And this is you doing all of your own work. Because realistically, if it's been sitting for any real length of time, it's probably going to need a rebuild engine-wise. Price that out yourself, but you'll find out that that's going to get real expensive real quick. If it doesn't need that, you've come across lucky. But if the thing's been sitting forever, you could have water in places water ain't supposed to be. You've got seals that are basically cooked. You've got valve springs that have been stuck open forever in some of the cylinders, at least two. You've got all these things that are going on with that engine. You're going to have a lot of parts that are going to need to be replaced. If you can't do that work yourself, now you've got labor that's going to be stacked on top of it. So we're going to call it a rebuild just for the sake of argument. Rebuild's going to cost you a couple of grand at least coming into this conversation. Trans, if you need any trans work done, that's probably going to be closer to $1,000. And again, we haven't even gotten into labor yet, but you're looking at $3 grand already. Plus tires, say that's another grand, plus brake lines. And if you haven't ever done a set of brake lines, you'll only do one set. After that, you will use the green wrench to make sure that job gets done. And that's going to probably be closer to a couple of grand too. So you can see where this is adding up. Then you get into, where are we at? Like 5 grand, 6 grand, whatever the number is. Call it 6 because I haven't been keeping track. Then you've got every bushing in the car needing to be replaced. You've got a potential carburetor that's going to need to be replaced. That's $500. On and on it goes. Fuel lines, hoses, radiator, water pump. The list keeps going on and on. You haven't even touched any body work. Just a solid detail is going to cost you $500. And believe me, if I'm spending all day on a car with a freaking DA and I'm tearing the thing apart to clean things, yeah, you're not getting away from me without spending less than at least 3 or 4 C notes. So again, the list keeps going on and on and on and on and on. By the time it's all said and done, you've got so much money wrapped up in the thing. Let's say that you've got, at the end of the day, you've got an extra 15 grand put into that car to get it just where you want it. Hopefully, the thing keeps running right for a long, long time. What the hell kind of bug is that? And you never have to keep sinking money into it again. But again, we're talking about a car from the 60s. You're talking about some cars that were designed to run on leaded gasoline, which means now you had to have the heads pulled off of it anyway. During the course of your rebuild, I'm just kind of remembering some other things. So you have to have hardened valve seats put in. That's an extra. It's just extra. And for what? Plus the time. By the time this build is done, are you even still going to want the damn thing? That happens to happen a lot. In fact, a lot of guys start to look at those cars the way that they look at boats. The 2 happiest days of your life of a boat owner is the day you buy them and then the day you get rid of them. So that's kind of how classic cars can end up working out. Plus, if you're not used to driving a classic car, you're in for a world of excitement because no brakes, no ABS, no nannies, no traction control. None of those things are going to be there to help you out when that car or truck or whatever it is that's basically more or less a tractor with a more powerful engine and a better transmission starts to get a little squirrely. Now, I'm not saying any of this stuff to scare you away. I'm just saying that the reality here is a little bit more, well, it's a little bit more real than what people are really willing to deal with. And again, you've got to be on board with this project for about at least a year. I mean, you're never going to get one of these things turned in less than a year. And hopefully you still want the contraption after that year is over with. So anyway, let's see. Oh, but as far as being upside down on the thing, um, staying with LS Swap's comment. So let's say you are just barely able to break even with this thing. That's again assuming that you were able to work with a vehicle that was gifted to you. What if you buy the thing? Well, if you buy it, chances are, if it's a desirable vehicle, you're not going to get into the thing for less than $4,000, $5,000. If it says Mopar anywhere near or anywhere on that thing, then add another $2,000 or $3,000 to that. But then you're getting into something that you don't have any idea what the history is, aside from what you can see. So that's another area where, well, you can basically get seriously burned in that respect. You have no idea if the thing's been wrecked. You have no idea what's going on underneath it unless you really get underneath there and inspect it. There's a lot of things going on with these vehicles that, well, to be honest with you, the folks that have owned them aren't that honest, and they've had 40, 50 years worth of time to get dinged, binged, dinged up, wrecked, and whatever. And shoddy workmanship notwithstanding, I've seen some good looking cars that when you get underneath them, I mean, you want to run for the hills. Just like they made the car look cute so that it would be attractive to a buyer, but only a buyer that wasn't willing to crawl around underneath it. So anyway, that opens up a whole new can of worms, so that car that you sink $30,000 into, by the time you bought the car and done everything else to it, may only be worth 20. And that's if it could be you getting away with it kind of lucky. So, is that 10 grand worth it to have probably no AC, no overdrive transmission, or maybe you did swap out an overdrive if you're smart. At some point you would. To have a vehicle that is slower than practically everything by any real measurable metric available, and you've paid $10,000 above and beyond what you can sell the thing for the privilege of that. So just understand that coming into it. And I guess really the point to this is, before you dive headlong into doing one of these builds, you need to educate yourself, and you need to learn what the living experience is like with one of these vehicles. Not just the driving experience, you're going to need that too. In fact, where a lot of folks find themselves getting stung is that they realize pretty quickly that they get captivated by the style. Let's say you're really into Chevelles. They'll get really captivated by this Chevelle, only to find out that driving around in one of these things is not like driving around in your modern vehicles. They don't have any accoutrement, right? They don't have anything. They don't have anything at all inside of them. It's roll-up windows. It's a shifter lever or a gear shifter for your transmission, a couple of pedals and some chairs, and that's it. No airbags. Again, no nannies, nothing to keep you from, nothing to protect you, I should say, from yourself. And this is where guys don't seem to understand the difference, especially when it comes to the safety portion, handling, and braking of the driving experience of one of these older cars. If you've never driven something that doesn't have ABS or anything else other than that, looking at you, Revlon. I'm sorry, looking at you, Foxy, not you, Revlon. But anyway, if you've never driven a car that's basically seemingly unstable at any speed, but if you've never driven a car that doesn't have the provisions to try to save you if things get a little bit out of control, you'll find out pretty quickly that it can be very unsettling, basically being on that trapeze, so to speak, without a net. Because that's basically what you're doing when you're playing around with one of these older cars. You don't have the nanny to protect you in terms of ABS. You don't have stability control or anything like that. So if something does happen, it's on you to figure out how to fix it. Now, I will say this, Fox Body Mustangs are fantastic trainer cars. You get about 300 to 400 horsepower out of one of these things, And you can learn how to do a lot of really cool things in a car. That's what this car taught me back when I was very young. But all of that can come at a cost if things get a little bit out of control, so to speak. No pun intended. Anyway, getting back to it. Anthony's saying, yeah, these things sit for a long time. Anthony's saying, he's talking about it now. Evening, B. What's up, Anthony? Jimmy's saying, I bought many other people's nightmares. Yeah, and that's part of it. You will buy, if you buy somebody else's car, just know that you're buying somebody else's nightmare. And again, what do you start with? Everybody, well, I don't know where to start. You start with the brakes. You make sure that the thing is safe. Then you go to electrical, make sure all the electrical stuff works, your fuel sending unit, the lights, everything else, safety related, inspection passing type of safety related, make sure that it's got new tires. Oh yeah, damn, before I forget, how many times do people just go, it's got tires on it, the tread's good, they go out and drive it, the car's been sitting for 15 years, that's 15-year-old rubber. Yeah, that's a bad idea. So anyway, again, the list goes on, and it's highly frustrating. Once you start getting into one of these builds, you need to know all the pitfalls, guys. You've got to know what you're going to be up against, because you don't want to get involved with one of these builds only to become just crazy frustrated on the back end, or halfway through, I should say, or find out that if you're not, you're not good with your hands, and if you're averse to the sight of blood, this is certainly not the hobby for you. At least if you're me. But the fact of the matter is, if you're not going to be doing a lot of the work yourself, just know that whatever you think it's going to cost, it's going to cost a lot more. So we're going to get into some of the more frustrating parts here in a minute. Let me check in with you guys real quick. CFL James saying, bottom line, you would need to spend about 150 grand on a vintage car to perform like a $45,000 car today. Exactly. Saying, I've had a lot of muscle cars of old, and I'm done spending Barrett Jackson money for a redone rat. True that, man. Good point. Habib saying, my Hellcat is my dream car. Dreams come true. Very nice. I like to hear that. So is mine. I like that car a lot. Kobe saying, thoughts on a good wax and wheel cleaner? The best wheel cleaner in the world is going to be a rag, water, and soap. Unfortunately, I don't really like any of the wheel cleaners. They're a little bit on the harsh side. But that's just me. I just have never had any real good luck with any of the aftermarket wheel cleaners. I know Adams does a good job. Chemical Guys has one that does pretty well. It's kind of gentle, but yeah, water, soap, some agitation, the Mothers has the attachments that work well to your drill. As far as wax goes, I like Griot's Garage. I also like, what is the one I've been using? Dadgummit. Crap. It's a Chemical Guys product, and I can't remember which one. It's the 3-in-1 from Chemical Guys. I like that product because it stays nice and rich. And it's very easy to spread, and it doesn't dust up a lot. The Griot's Garage, oh shit, this stuff right here, this wax, the liquid 3-in-1 wax from Griot's is really good too. Good working time on your DA. So I would recommend this or the Chemical Guys 3-in-1. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. Or all-in-one. I'm sorry. The Chemical Guys all-in-one. I got this stuff sitting right here. I forgot that I was messing with this thing earlier. I like these two. These are the two that I like for just an actual wax. You're not really cutting the paint with these. You're really more bringing out luster, and you're knocking down, some real light scratches, things like that. But just, if you're running a DA, running it at about, and you can use orange pads with these too. I know a lot of guys like to use the black pads, the finishing pads, but I'll use an orange pad with those, and it works out great. As a matter of fact, it's really good for spreading wax. Let's see, what else is in there? Oh, there's an ultimate compound. Huh. Don't use that unless you really want to gut paint, or strip paint rather. But anyway, those are the two that I like. And again, with your DA, just run it in with an orange pad or your black pad if you're just going to do a wax. If you're just doing the wax, I would suggest either one of those two products. They're going to protect and they're going to do a pretty good job for you. But in terms of spreadability, the Chemical Guys is going to be a little bit better. It'll give you a little bit more working time. But they're both really good. And I mean, I wouldn't really want to nitpick between the two, but the Chemical Guys will also dust up a little bit less. Oh, Anthony's saying something to shine it up or just clean it. Let's see. Mark's saying, "Son, Mason, what's up, man? My dream build car would just be a Challenger with a blower on it that can be heard from 12 miles away. It doesn't even have to be a Hellcat. That'd be a fun one." Catalyst saying, "I want a 60 Plymouth Fury. That would be a sweet car, by the way." Cubby saying, "Shine up." Anthony G saying, "Window cleaner. Adams or Griots is good." Yep, Ellis is checking in. Ellis is saying, "Avoid Chemical Guys." I like Chemical Guys stuff. Actually, I don't have any problems with it. In fact, when I hit Revlon with it, it was probably the easiest to lay that I had used. But again, this is also a 3-in-1. Now, there are products from Chemical Guys I would run away from, and those are, they're over there on the other side. Those are some of the compounds. I think it's 32 and 34 are the two. Stay away from those. They dust up like crazy. And even if you've got compressed air on tap, it's not going to do any good. That stuff makes a bloody mess of everything. In fact, I used McGuire's, oh, it's down here. I can't get to it. It's McGuire's Ultimate Compound when I was just tearing the paint off of this thing, trying to get down to some workable product. I was using the McGuire's Ultimate Compound on a orange pad with my DA, and I mean it was pulling quite a bit of paint off of it, but it worked pretty well and it had decent work time. I was just doing small areas at a time with it though too. Let's see. Oh, Anthony's saying I just use window cleaner that is tint safe, no alcohol or ammonia. That is correct. Tad's checking in saying, "My car is stored for winter and about every other week I go out and start it and let it get up to near operating temp. Is that okay, or should I do more or less?" No. You're doing good by what you're doing. My main thing is just make sure that you keep the gas tank topped off. What ends up happening is everything warms up and then there's the potential for condensation to get in there. Keep that gas tank topped off. So you get in there, run it, let it get to operating temperature. And then make sure that you top it off with fresh fuel. And that fresh fuel, like I say, you may not even burn, half a gallon while you got the thing out there running. You let it run for 20 minutes, keep the electricals good, let the thermostat open and close, go through several heat cycles there. You're not going to burn that much fuel, but just know that if you do that, say over the course of a month, about every couple of weeks, add a little bit of fuel to it. Just that way you don't get any of the condensation, because the fuel will warm up because it's going through a pump and then it goes through the fuel rails, which is going to heat them up, which, the return side will bring it back to the car if it's a return style fuel system. If it's not so much of a big deal, but just something to think about. But keep that tank topped up. Let's see. Brent's hanging out with LS. LS is asking Tad if it's on jack stands. Depends on how long it's sitting for, by the way, guys. Modern radials are pretty good. But if you're on drag radials, get it off of drag radials. Do not let it sit on drag radials like that. You will regret it because they will flat spot and it will take about 10 miles before they start to come back to life. So just know that coming into it. Let's see. Oh, Clutch saying Sudsbox is the best I've worked with, and I've worked with Chemical Guys and Griots. The Intensive Collection Pro Kit V2 from Sudsbox comes with soap, wheel cleaning kit, clay bar, and interior kit. Yeah, this is stuff that I just get at, I've got a local Chemical Guys, so I can just go there and get product. And the Griot stuff works pretty good for most guys when they're doing their own work. Now, I'm not going to say that these are like pro quality, although the Chemical Guys stuff's pretty damn good. Griots, a lot of pros use griots too, as just something that they're used to, and they get good results out of it. But yeah, for the more intense, the hardcore detail fanatics, they're going to go with some other products for sure. Let's see. Oh, Clutch is checking in with his ideas on those, on some of these products, saying I would stick with griots for their ceramic spray, lasts forever and water beads up really well. Good to hear about that, because I'm about to do that to Revlon. Modern Red Hemi saying, what's up, Mr. Mason? What's up, man? Got it. Or Professor Mason. So no, getting back to one of the things. So let's get back to the topic, guys. One of the big frustrating parts, we're talking about keeping the car looking good, which I'm glad. Obviously there's going to be a lot of paint issues, paint corrections, things like that you're going to be involved in. It's your opportunity to learn a new skill set, which is paint correcting, detailing, things like that. But one of the big issues that you're going to run into before you can even get to that point, and I hate to say this, but it's going to be parts availability. A lot of guys get into a car only to find out that getting parts that they need is practically impossible. You've got old plastic that it gets brittle and it breaks, and these things are holding in like light fixtures and things like that. This stuff breaks. Where do you go to get it? I'll give you a perfect example of this. There's a place that has, it's a field of DeSotos, basically. It's at an old Dodge dealership. And old Fire Dome DeSotos, that whole bit. The sad thing about it is that's one of my favorite cars. Late 50s DeSotos. I freaking love them. From a styling, performance standpoint, the whole bit. But here's the problem. You can't get parts for them. And so I would end up spending, if I were able to get a hold of one of these cars, I would end up spending somewhere north of $70,000, $80,000 for a car that I could maybe get $45,000 for. And that's if I got ultimately lucky with every step that I took. Realistically, as stated earlier, it can end up costing you $80,000, $90,000. And that's not uncommon for builds like that. So, let's say you get a truck, you got LMC Truck, Brothers Trucks, you got all these different companies that are vying for your attention. Fox Body Mustangs, or any Mustang for that matter. You've got Late Model Restoration and every other company that's out there that will help you put that car together. The problem is that once you start getting away from the major brands, and really even once you start getting into the Mopar side of things, reproduction parts get pretty difficult to find. But it makes sense because there's not a lot of folks that are messing with those cars so much anymore, because again, they don't perform the way that modern cars do. They're not as safe as modern cars. A lot of people just don't feel comfortable with these things at all. And so they're just not messing with them. So as that market declines, and keep in mind, we did have a bubble at one point with these various aftermarket manufacturers of different parts for all the manufacturers. But that bubble's gone down. The value of these cars has gone down. And as the value of the cars comes down, less and less people are willing to put the time, effort, money, sweat equity, what have you, into them. It's just not worth it, only to have a car that is going to get waxed by practically any pedestrian car of today. I mean, look at a V6 Camaro, for example. That thing will absolutely scream by comparison to like an old small block Camaro of the day. And it's crazy to think that that's the time that we're living in, but it is. So, what would have been considered a secretary's car back in the day, you plop that guy time machine style out of the mid 60s or late 60s and plop him into that car, and he's going to think he's driving something, well, and he would be, with double the horsepower that he just got out of. In other words, our V6s today make significantly more power than a V8 did back then, especially if you're talking about an entry-level V8, which would be struggling by modern standards to make anywhere near 150, 160 horsepower. So just know that, guys. Oh, and here comes the other side of the should you do it. You know, there's an old expression, never meet your heroes. And that expression holds extremely well when it comes to cars. When I was a kid, I loved the Mopars. My favorite car of all time back then, though, would have been the old Shelby AC Cobra. There was something about that car that I absolutely loved, and I had the opportunity to own one, and I loved that car. And that's a rare instance where meeting my hero was kind of, well, it was all I could have hoped it would have been. A big block AC made by Superformance, which was the only company that Carroll Shelby had licensed to make his cars and was making parts for the CSX cars. That was my car. And I loved it. But I ended up getting rid of it. And it's like, well, if you loved it so much, why did you get rid of it? The reason why I got rid of it is because as fun and as crazy as having a big block Cobra is, the driving experience was a nightmare. I mean, it was nowhere near comfortable. It was nowhere near fun. The car was basically out to kill me at any given time. But it made me a much better driver, and I was able to do things with that car that, you know, I never thought I'd be able to do. But it is the only car that I've ever owned that I didn't take to the drag strip. That thing was scary fast. And we're talking driving down the highway in fourth gear, rolling to the throttle and start smoking the tires kind of fast. And that's kind of scary when you're dealing with a 2,700 pound car making about 530 horsepower. And you've got a wheelbase that's basically as long as your arms are stretched out. So anyway, there's that. So, but for most guys, for most folks, I am an exception to the rule, by the way. For most guys, you get behind the wheel of, say, a 396 Chevelle. It's an easy car to pick on. Mild, big block, 4-barrel, some cam, but you're going to have a turbo 400 and let's say a 308 rear end, just so the thing has some kind of a highway manner going down the freeway. That car may not be all you hoped it would be. Now, for somebody young who's never really experienced horsepower or torque or a big block or the sound or any of that, it's going to be a rush, especially if they're into cars. But again, you find out pretty quickly and abruptly, I might add, just how slow that car can be. And keeping in mind that and when I say very, I mean a very healthy big block will put down, and this is on a dyno jet, by the way, a healthy by the standards of the day that we're talking about. That very healthy big block will be doing very good to put down 350 horsepower to the rear wheels, especially through an automatic, which those automatics were woefully inefficient, although they would launch like crazy. Which is why we still use turbo 400s to this day. But anyway, you get the point that I'm making, that the power isn't there. The noise is, the torque is, the tip-in throttle response is. All of that is there from a driver's point of view. But from a comparative standpoint, it's really not. And again, you're dealing with something that, by the way, you're using another area of frustration. You're using modern gasoline. Here's something that I have had to deal with personally with Sierra. Sierra's got a carburetor. Sierra also has a mechanical fuel pump. Hopefully that will be changing soon enough once I get it over to Dr. Differential to have her basic makeover done, because we're going to have to put an electric fuel pump into this thing. The problem is modern gasoline having 10% ethanol has a lower boiling point than non-ethanol fuel. What does that mean? In short, vapor lock. And it is a nightmare. What it means is that if you shut the thing off, let it idle for any real length of time, the fuel will boil in the lines. If it boils in the lines, it's creating all this, the fumes. The gasoline doesn't get to the carburetor, and the gasoline doesn't get to the carburetor because it's boiling. The vehicle turns off, and you ain't going to start it again for about an hour and a half. So wherever you are, I hope you like it there. You're stuck there for an hour and a half while your fuel lines, your carburetor, and everything else cools off. Let me tell you how much of a treat that is. So that's another issue that you're going to run into, and you're going to find very quickly one of the main reasons why so many people either install electric fuel pumps only or just flat out LS swap everything is because, well, it makes sense. When you're dealing with modern fuel, you need to deal with modern fuel systems. If you don't, you will run into the pitfalls that I've gotten to run into with Sierra. Word to the wise, guys, it's a real thing, and you need to know that if you're not paying attention to these types of things, it can come back and bite you. Let's see. Oh, Anthony's saying he likes the ceramic. Just comes with the territory in a race car. Sometimes you don't want a race car, though. Brent saying, I had an 04 GTO, sold it for a few grand less than I paid for it, but they are GTO in name only. Yep, I would agree with that. Cool car, though. It's just a shame. The thing that's a shame about the GTO is that they could have brought it over with all the Holden body panels, which I think looks better than the GTO panels did. But it's funny that the guys in Australia all wanted GTO panels, so there was a lot of swapping going on at one point. Jimmy checking in with exactly what I was thinking of too. Tie rod ends, the bane of my existence with old cars. Every damn time, absolutely. Chuck Rice saying happy holidays. Happy holidays to you, Chuck. Let's see. Ship is asking, can I upgrade my 392 M6 drive shafts and half shafts to M6 Hellcat parts in case I break one on the launch? The drive shaft won't swap over, and the half shafts are the same half shafts. So I don't think you have anything really to get there. If you want to upgrade them, I'd say go with the G-Force half shafts. And if you want to get a different drive shaft, I would say go with the dual CV jointed DSS drive shaft, which I had one of the prototypes for that, which is now on Sean Eaton's car. And he loves it. Anthony's saying, bust out another 1,000. That is true. Clutch is hanging out with Modern Red. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Jimmy's hanging out with Shift, and they are really tough on the 392. Chuck's asking, B, can you tell me what the rear traction is on my 2020 Challenger RT Plus shaker? Oh, asking, is it positive traction? It is it's a track, not track lock, true track, I think is what they call it. But yeah, it is. Should be, actually, if it's an RT Plus. I believe it is, but you need to check that. It should be a 309 posi in essence, but check that. Check your build sheet, because I've seen it go both ways. Modern Red's hanging out with Clutch. Boost saying, hello, Modern Red. Let's see. I like it. Uncle Secret South, still love Uncle Secret. Building your dream car, should you do it? For me personally, no. I simply do not have time. Work 56 hours a week. Have just enough time to enjoy driving my 392 and maintain it. Perfect opportunity to talk about this. Thank you very much, Uncle Stinkford. So here's the thing also when it comes to this. Keep one thing in mind when you're talking about, and I'm going to keep picking on the Chevelle because there is a bajillion of them made and a lot of guys love them. Back in the day, that car cost the equivalent of $26,000 today. They were far less expensive from a strength of the dollar and all this other stuff, average income, all this other things. Anyway, just work with me here. They cost about $26,000. And back then, you didn't have the bills that you have today. I mean, housing was about the same in terms of actual dollar for dollar spent, but you didn't have cell phones and internet bills and all the bills that you have today, cable bills, what have you. Anyway, the car was a major deal for a lot of guys, but it didn't make up the huge portion that it does like today, where the average cost of that type of a car, he was talking about a Mustang, it's the lowest cost of all of them, is still going to be about $30,000 to $35,000. So, you know, another 10 grand, that's another 30 to 33% more expensive of a vehicle. They weren't meant to last forever. I mean, look, if a Mustang, if any of the cars today had the technology in them that those cars had in them, they would be that cheap. Okay. So, they weren't meant to last forever. And again, I'd said this earlier, but the part about what they cost versus what the average person made them even that much more disposable is what I'm trying to get into. So the guys that had them even back then really weren't taking care of them as well as they normally would take care of something more the way that you would think that they would take care of it, because it wasn't a special thing. It was just a conveyance that was a hot rod that would make a bunch of noise. Hang on just a second. GS1, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. GS1's asking, I ended up buying the Weld RTS 17x10 welds for my 2019 Charger. Do I need any special lug nuts for them? I'm wondering if you have any advice on the tire size or type of drag radial I should use. The RTS, I believe, uses a standard acorn style nut, but I would check on that just to be safe. But if memory serves me correctly, it does not use a shank lug nut. Check on that though, and make sure that you get a lug nut with the right taper in the acorn. Typically, if it's set up like a non-shank lug nut, then your stock lug nuts will typically work fine. But get a hold of Weld and just make sure before you get into that. Most of the guys that I know run the Dark Stars, and not very many people I know are running the RTSs. But if it's anything like the, anything like some of the other wheels that use a non-shank lug nut, then you should be fine with what you got, but just check on that. Now, 17x10 for the rears, what tire size and what drag radial should you use? So I can only give you advice from my own experience. If you are only going to use these things, going to the drag strip, drag racing, and then coming home, fair weather only, no chance of rain, anything like that, get a set of 305, 45, 17, either ET Street R or ET Street SS drag radials. That's going to be where you're going to be in the safest place. If you're going to be running this thing on the street primarily, where you could potentially get caught in some rain, I would say go with the ET Street SSs. That would be my go-to if I was going to put a set of tires on a set of welds. The reason for that, softer compound, it's got some tread pattern, so it'd be somewhat safe in the rain, but just know that if you even go through a wet area, you got to drag the speed way down, half of the speed limit if possible. And it is going to be possible in some areas. If you like, I'm not even sure if there is a 17-inch version of the Tri-5 R2. Maybe something to look into if you're going to be running this thing more and more on the street. In other words, more of a daily setup than anything else. But what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to think that you're stuck to any one type of tire, because the different tires have their pros and cons. So an ET Street R is going to hook up a lot better for you, period. That's just, it's going to, based on the type of tire that it is. No tread, no nothing like that, and they're going to remain cleaner. If you have a bunch of tread with a soft compound, that treading, basically that footprint is going to get torn up basically because it's a hard edge and it's a soft rubber, and when you're spinning that, obviously it's going to make a little bit of a mess. It's going to kind of tear up those edges. So you'll notice those tires will be a little bit more messy on your rear quarter panels. Something like an ET Street R, which is still a radial, you don't run into those same problems. And I know plenty of guys that run ET Street Rs on the drag strip, on the way to the track. They run them on the street. They do a lot of street hits, things like that. that's something that you're going to want to take into account. So I would just say that those would be the 2 tires that I would look at for street use. Now, if you're talking about drag strip use, man, I can't say that I would use any other tire right now other than the Hoosier DBRs. I have a lot of love for the DBRs. It is a drag bracket radial. It is basically a stickier version of what you would consider the ET Street R to be. However, there's one significant caveat here. You're basically stuck with these things at the drag strip. Now, you could probably drive your car to the track and back, provided that you're tripping more than maybe 20, 25 minutes or so, maybe even 30 minutes, but no street hits, no nothing, because what'll happen is this tire is so soft that you can feather the actual the rubber on the tire. It's a term called feathering, and what ends up happening is that the rubber gets it's just like having feathers all over it, and it won't hook. You have to literally reverse the tires, basically rotate the two back to back, and then drive them like that to get those feathers going the other direction, basically just to get them off the tire. It's known on our side as just cleaning slicks is what you're doing with it. So again, when you're looking at the tires from the point of view of a functionability standpoint, the functionability takes precedent over the grip. In this case, for you, again, if you're running on the street a lot, Mickey Thompson is going to be the only compound that I would recommend at this point. With the drag only setup, go with the drag only tire. It'll be a lot more consistent on the launch, and I think you'll be a lot happier with it. Just remember that those DBRs are not going to last as long as the ET Street Rs. So keep looking at those ET Street Rs if they're available, because they will survive and do just fine with street use. All right. Hang on, let me get back to over here. But thank you very much for the contribution, brother. I appreciate it. Let's see. Oh, hang on. Went a little bit too far up. Let's see. Oh, Uncle Secret said, I'd love to build a 6667 Charger, just don't have the time. Yeah. I know a lot of guys that at this stage of the game just don't want to make the time for it. It's too much of a headache, too much stress. It's just not any fun for a lot of folks to go through that. Brennan's asking, I know this is off topic, but what are your thoughts on Demon-like springs for the Hellcat, such as Demon Killer, OEM Demon, or HHP drag springs? Is it worth it? One thing about the Demon springs is that they are softer, primarily. They're good. I mean, they will absolutely transfer some weight. My car dead hooks with the setup that it's got, so I don't know that they're really worth it. Some folks have said that they picked up some ET out of them. I don't know that I've seen that yet. To me, the jury's a little bit out on that. Again, I don't think that they would do me any good with Revlon, but again, with the tires that I'm running, those DBRs, when I stand on the throttle, she gets it. So, more weight transfer wouldn't do me any good. So I'd say run the right tire and you should be in better shape. Chuck's saying his dream classic would be an original 70 Challenger, which I'm sure won't handle like my new one. No, it won't. Ella's saying the Fox is such a great platform, great for drag racing. And they'll handle a lot, man. A guy's been doing stuff with Fox bodies forever. You've had guys do everything from autocross, open track, Silver State type stuff. You've got basically everything that you can think of. Guys have done it with Fox body cars. So yeah, it's fun though. Let's see. Jimmy's saying unstable at speed. Looking at you, stock Fox body Mustangs. Thanks for all the Ford Ranger parts. No shit, right? No, that's 100% right. And Anthony's saying they weigh nothing. They don't weigh anything. That's part of the good thing and the bad thing about them. Oh, Mr. Blacktop saying the Eagle One makes a fantastic wheel cleaner. I'll have to check it out, man. I just you know what I use? I hate to say this. I just use Simple Green on mine. I mean, it's just it doesn't hurt anything. It keeps everything looking cute, and I just hit it with some Simple Green, let it sit in just long enough for me to fire up the pressure washer, and bzzz, it cleans it all right up. So you can buy gallons of that stuff. I get them in like these big jugs. Riff checking in saying, "What's up, y'all? What's up, man?" Chuck Rice saying he likes McGuire's products. McGuire's actually isn't half bad. The only downside to some of the McGuire's products is that you get a much shorter working time with those if you're using a DA. Oh, Habu saying, did you seriously consider resto modding an old muscle car like a Charger or Cuda? And then I thought how scared I would be to drive it on freeways in LA and knew it would only be a garage queen. Happens to happen a lot, bro. I would say modern muscle solve that. Thank you, Dodge. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%, as you can see. Rift is asking, should I use ethanol fuel conditioner and stabilizers in my E85 Hellcat? No, don't do it. In fact, don't add anything to that fuel other than more E85. I don't like that. Don't try to cheat the octane up with E90. Just don't do it. Just make sure you're running quality E85 and you'll be in good shape. I would suggest highly that you are changing your oil at a maximum of 3,000 miles, and that if you have the ability to switch the tunes back and forth about once every 4 to 5 months, run a couple of tanks of 93 octane through it. If you can switch the tune back and forth. If not so much of a problem, but you are going to need to know that you're going to be changing that oil more often. So keep that in mind. Brian's checking in saying, I purchased another 5.7 Hemi for my 19 RT Challenger. I need to build internals for Hellion twin turbo setup. Any advice on an internal build? Any of the forged, the Callie's rods or the Molnar rods and pistons, all of that will be just fine. I know that HHP sells a 5.7 forged piston and rod rotating, not rotating, they do that too, but rods and piston setup. I'd go with that. Just remember that you've got, when you go forged, that's good. But just remember that your ring gap is going to be the key to the success and survival of your combination. I like to stick with like a high boost setup, like what you're looking at least 6 thousandths per inch of bore. I would still come in at like 24 thousandths ish for the top and second ring. You might even go to like 30,000 or not 30, probably 27,000 for your number 2 ring, 25 for the top. Make sure they're 180 degrees apart. But that's what I would do if I were building a car specifically for boost. The main thing again is going to be in the ring gap. You got to remember that those things will be making a lot of power. You need to be able to make sure that you don't end up popping a ring land. So absolutely go with that wider ring gap. Let's see. But that is in essence your setup. And depending on what fuel you're going to run, 93 octane stuff, I'd say stick around 10 to 1, maybe 9.5 to 1 at the lowest. And if you're going to go with E85, I'd say anything's good if you're running E85. Just make sure for you E85 guys. Oh, before I forget, yeah. Damn, almost forgot. Glad you brought it up. For all you E85 guys, it's winter. This is the time that you need to be checking your E85. Test it right now before you fill it up and before you go beating on your car. make sure that you test your E85. Chances are it's going to come back somewhere around E70 or E75. This is completely normal, but just know that your E85 is not E85. It's more like E70. Keeping in mind that the MEA spec for E85 is E70 to E90. You won't find E90. You'll mainly find E85. So again, just if for no other reason than my own public service announcement to all you guys, make sure you're checking your E85. We've already seen E85 checking in at about E70 up, well, down here in Texas, primarily in Dallas. I have seen data logs on cars already that I can tell you straight away that the ethanol content based on just the data that I saw from short-term knock retard, keeping in mind this is an E85 cars, you're seeing poorer fuel quality right now. So please check your E85. Oh, and the reason why they run more gasoline during the winter is just so that stuff doesn't freeze up. So there is your public service announcement from your old buddy Brian. Rips is checking in saying, I like the Voodoo Ride cleaners. I haven't heard of them. They sound good though. Cody's saying, what up, B-Mason? Work has been kicking my ass. I haven't been showing up to your streams. I've also been checking out the dealerships for a Buick Encore or a Regal just to be different. Just be different, man. I like it. Clutch is asking, any mods to lower 0 to 60 on a 392? I would assume a good tire and a tune with a couple of bolt-ons would be great, but any specifics that you would prefer one over the other? Yes. So, I mean, it depends on how serious you really want to get about this. We're talking about your daily, right? So you don't want to have to be swapping out tires and all this other stuff. I would say go with a stickier tire. Obviously, that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to help you. A tune and everything else is actually going to hurt you if it just means that the tires go up in smoke. So obviously a tune, yes. Transmission tunes where you're going to get most of your performance gain. However, you're going to want to take a look at a stickier tire. Any of the stickier tires will work in your stock size. So Nitto Tri-5 R2, ET Street SS are the two that come to mind straight away. NTO5 is actually a really good tire, by the way. And of the three, the one that's going to do best in the rain, if this is a true daily, is going to be the ET Street. I'm sorry, the Nitto 555 R2. So all of those will help. Obviously, the best way to get your best 0 to 60 time is going to be on a sticky tire on a drag strip because it's prepared for you. So there's that. But just know going into it that you're going to have a tire or the rest of the stuff is not going to do any good. Scott's checking and say, what up, Mason? Got the Arm Flex. I like it. Jim will say, Vapor Lock 6.6 liter TAs come to mind. Yep. Jeffrey's checking in. Jeffrey Benner is saying, what's going on, B? How's the weather down there in the big Lone Star State? Well, today it's pretty nice. It's been raining on and off for, I don't know, pretty much all weekend and part of last week coming into this week. Or coming into this weekend. So yeah, kind of sucks. Let's see. Cody saying, I wish they marketed the SS better. Yeah. I cannot believe. So the Chevy SS would have been a pretty cool car. Not talking about the truck thing, but the SS itself would have been a pretty cool car had anybody even known that it existed. It's such a weird thing. Almost like they didn't want to sell a lot of them. It just never did hear of any real marketing on that thing. It's so weird. Michael's asking, what do you think of 92 to 93 Dodge Daytonas? Oh man, I haven't even thought of that car, to be honest with you, in forever. 2.2 liter turbo, that little bitty Garrett. I had an 84 Dodge 600 turbo that I actually really liked, which is not that far removed from the 92, 93 Daytona. That car made, what, 175 horsepower or something like that? Good car. It was, there's not a whole lot really to say about them by today's standards, but they're lightweight, they're fun as hell to drive, and if you've got one, a couple of things will work pretty well. Hot rodded a little bit, but I just wouldn't expect a boatload out of those cars unless you really want to start getting like deep into all that is that 2.2 liter. Let's see. Brian saying, I built a true twin ram air for my 19 Challenger RT through headlights, and I have no lag at all in throttle response now. You no longer hear a suction sound and a pause as you do on the stock intake. Good deal. GS1 saying RTS are for, you say that GS1 saying the RTSs are for the strip. Yeah, ET Street Rs. Or rather, DBR. Who's your DBRs? HU37 saying cars in the 60s and 70s and early 80s were poorly built compared to today's cars. Motors started burning oil at 80,000 miles. Some were rust buckets at 5 to 7 years old. Cars at 100,000 miles, forget it. Well, yeah, a lot of that is true. Part of that is build quality. Part of that is the fact they didn't have overdrive transmissions. Weird. But yeah, no, they weren't built to last at all. In fact, here's a funny statistic for you guys. Most people now, average age of the car that they own, if they bought it new, typically they're keeping it over 10 years. 11 years, I think, was one of the statistical numbers. It used to be that people traded out cars about every 3 to 5 years. In fact, 5 years, holding a car for 5 years back in the day, I remember was like a long time. Like, damn, you had that thing for 5 years. It's time for you to get a new one. Like you were expecting it to just die and turn into dust on the side of the road. So, you know, it's just funny, but you're right. They weren't built to last, so to speak, because people were trading them in and they were selling them, you know, cheap on used car lots, and, you know, they get beaten on as a, you know, a secondhand car, as that they would call them. It was secondhand, you know, like you would call, you know, going to a resale shop as secondhand clothes, secondhand car, man. What's wrong with it? Somebody got rid of it, man. They don't want it anymore. It's starting to have problems, so they ditch it, you know, and but they didn't cost as much. Like the actual physical cost of it, the amount of hours that you had to work to afford it, it wasn't as high. And so that's the reason why, you know, people call them disposable for a reason. And also keep this in mind too, guys. Cars back then were the thing, right? Drag racing was the thing. The cruise was the thing. The way that, you know, you might think of a gaming system would be the thing now. That was the car back then. And people worked on their car the way that guys might work on a computer, or guys might do, you know, whatever non-car people do, LARPing or whatever that's called. So anyway, that's what they were into. And that was the thing that they did. And so when the next thing came out, it was analogous to the next, you know, Xbox coming out, or the next whatever's big in whatever we do nowadays. That the next big thing was the next car that was coming out, because for a long time, the next thing was better than the thing that came before it. And as all of that started to decline, in terms of, you know, they talk about insurance and gas prices going up and all the other stuff. It did, but it wasn't it didn't make the whole thing unaffordable. But it just started to fall out of favor. I mean, people got, you know, okay, we did the fast car thing, then we did the kind of luxury fast car thing, and then they started moving on to other stuff. And you know, if nobody's there to pick up and keep on with this performance thing, then just kind of leveled out and mellowed out. And then, of course, gas mileage did become an issue. And yeah, nobody wanted something that was going to only get 8 or 10 miles per gallon when gasoline was, you know, the working equivalent to, you know, $5 or $7 a gallon. I mean, they weren't going to do it. So, and again, people just kind of grew out of it. They got bored with it and moved on to other things. So there were playthings that were discarded. And again, they were never meant to last any longer than the next big thing. So let's see. Oh, HU saying just building an old car can become more work than fun. You know, the nostalgia is cool, but no, and that's the thing. That's what I was talking about. I mean, should you do it? man, it makes it real hard to justify after you put so much work into something. And it's funny too, because you can put a month's worth of salary into one of these things real quick, real easy, not even realize that you've done it, and look at it and not even be able to tell what you've done to it. I get that, believe me. So, you know, they turn into a money pit. Yeah, the nostalgic factor is kind of cool, but here's the other thing. What are you nostalgic for? I mean, to be nostalgic means that you miss something from your past. For a lot of folks, there isn't any nostalgia. I mean, it's like being nostalgic for a mythological past of your granddad, right? Like this is what granddad would have been like in an idealized scenario, you know? And so you love your granddad, you know, he used to be a street racer guy. You know, he had an old AMX and he used to just crush it. And that's what I want to build. And I'm going to be just like granddad. Well, the problem is that your granddad probably got sick of it after a while. Got tired of listening to people bitch about how much money he was spending on this thing, decided to ditch it and get into fishing or something, you know. Most hot riders, by the way, don't stay in it for too long. A lot of these guys get into Jeeps, get into off-road stuff, get into motorcycles, get into camping, fishing, outdoorsy type stuff, and leave it behind once they figure out that it's a complete, in their mind's eye, in their eye at that point in time, once they're done with it, like, man, I'm not going to waste my time messing with that stuff anymore. And, you know, I just can't keep up anyway. It's just not fun anymore. And that's really the other portion of the frustration is at some point, realize that your tastes can change and you've got to have some way to recoup the money that you put in that thing to pay for the new thing that you want to do, whatever that new thing might be. So that's part of the reality of this too, is that not only do you have to look at it from the now perspective, you've got to look at it from the future perspective. Are you going to want to keep this car around for that long? You know, I've been doing this stuff for a long time. Basically, I've been in and around this stuff since I can't remember not being around. It's more of a lifestyle really for me than anything else. Revlon, definitely like that car. I don't know of anything that's coming out that's going to pry that thing away from me, but we'll see. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I would be totally in love with. Viper with a Hellcat platform. But even then, we're talking about paper that you just can't get away from. Foxy, we'll see. She's going to stay in the family. It's kind of a family heirloom at this point. And besides, I've already replaced trim pieces and strikers, by the way, readjusted the doors, fixed the ashtray with the old wheel weight fix, by the way. Damn right I did it like that. I've got, you can't see it, but right over here, there's a box with the headlights, because as you can see, the headlights are looking pretty foggy. I'm going to be replacing the headlights on her. And then after the first of the year, I'll put it up in the air, get the transmission out of it, get the bell housing off of it. It's a freaking late wood scatterproof, and put a different clutch in it. And probably rear control arms as well at that point. I think the rubber, it's still got the stock lower control arms on it, and they're looking pretty rough. So that'll be the extent of what I'll be up to. But since she's been sitting here and since I bought all the parts, that's what I've been up to. So as far as how-to videos on stuff like that, guys, it's one screw and you just pull the stuff off of it. The goop that's in what would be the drip rail trim, but these cars don't have drip rails, is a pain in the butt. The clips don't want to stay on the trim piece. There's no way to film it gracefully, but I can tell you it's only one screw that holds it on. You pop it off, put the other one back up, kind of give it the old hammer fist to get it to seat up. A pair of needle nose pliers can help to try to crimp some of the clips onto that, but best of luck to you, man. You'll know what I'm talking about if you're replacing them. Get it kind of centered, and you'll be fine. It's a process that you have to do to know how to do it. It's a learn by doing, not a learn by watching, because there's some things. The weird thing is that I figured out a way to sliverly slice. I'm trying to just like sliver and slice my fingers up in the process of that. I found every one of these little 1 millimeter cuts that are all over my finger. You can't really see it. Anyway, this one doesn't have any on it, and then of course where I took that nice fat chunk out of this finger, it's healing up pretty nice, pretty fast too. Anyway, those trim pieces were a treat. The door belt line trim was, those are real easy. It's just one screw, unscrew it, you kind of slide it back and lift it up off these little guides that are on there. You may have to drill out some rivets and rivet in some of the actual track guides, but I didn't have to do it on this car, so everything's good there. What else did I do to that thing? Did the tape weight trick to the ashtray lid. I've got the ECU relocation harness coming, I don't know, sometime, hopefully next week. What do I care? It could be coming in next month. The car's not going anywhere by that time. Do need to order the lower control arms along with the clutch. Going to get a McLeod, just a regular McLeod, because they can hold the power where the center force exploded. I feel like I'm forgetting something. What else did I do to this thing? Anyway, it'll dawn on me eventually. But I have been doing some work to it. Oh, yeah, the strikers. Duh, what am I thinking? So replace the strikers and the struts for the hatch. Again, no real, no real graceful way to show that that replacement procedure. But when you see the gas shock, you'll know what I'm getting at. There's these clips that you need to remove, or at least pry away from the old struts to get them off. Top tip, make sure you've got something to hold your hatch up, obviously, through this process, but you pop those clips off and you can rock that thing and pop it off those ball and socket joints. Little bit of grease, throw the things back in there, you'll be in good shape. But they'll kind of pop back into place, and then you're done. So there's really nothing there. It's a little bit fidgety though. To get in there, you'll need like a pick and a small flathead screwdriver. You kind of get in there and pop those things off. The strikers, on the other hand, are kind of funny. So if you've blown up a set of strikers on your doors, I've seen all kinds of fixes for this. So, but I had to readjust my door striker itself where it sat. And now, I mean, the door, you just walk over there, pop it open and close it. There's nothing to it. So just know that the lower you go with the striker, the more in the door is going to be. So you're going to have to move that striker out if you drop it down. If you bring it up, the door is going to want to stick out. You're going to want to rock that thing back as much as possible. But there is enough adjustment in there where you'll be able to get the thing back. I mean, obviously it was right at some point with a striker. So anyway, striker for the hatch, striker for both doors, the strong arms, and all the rest of the trims. I need to sand the mirrors and repaint them. I got a bunch of little goofy stuff, but it doesn't matter because I ain't got a clutch. So there's that. Let's see. Hilton was asking what wheel horsepower you're looking for at an 89 octane tuned Ram. Mine made 333 to the rear wheels. So, and that's on 89 octane. Let's see. Oh, Kevin's saying, hey, after a good time using the Sprint booster, it's kind of like the Pedal Commander. I can say for sure that this Challenger with just long tube 6.4 intake, catback exhaust, 373 gear, and a good tune is plenty fun. Yes, they are. Glad you like it too. Speed saying, hey, B, what's the best 392 Charger to get? Daytona Scat Pack or 2016 SRT? Do they all have performance pages? Yeah, they do. The later ones have a little bit better, navigating in the Uconnect. So that'd be like the 17 and ups have a little bit better Uconnect navigation ability. They're just a little bit faster to respond, look a little bit better too. But the Daytonas are nice, but they all have the same drivetrain, so they're all the same in terms of speed. Chuck's checking out. Got you, Chuck. Thanks for hanging out. Let's see. Cody's talking about an LS Fox body with slicks and a turbo. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Make a ton of power. Be sketch though. Kevin's saying, Mason, what's the most horsepower you think can be put down to the wheels in a Challenger RT 5-speed or 8-speed with a stock cam in a RTs? The most I've seen is 365-ish. But it's on a Mustang dyno, and I don't actually, that one had a cam in it. Most of them, the best you can hope for realistically, about 340 on a Mustang dyno. That's the most that we would see. And it's a good number. I mean, it's not 392 numbers, but it's not that far off. I mean, when you're looking at, a healthy 392 will put down 405. Some will be 410, but those are some outliers. 405 to the rear wheels is not uncommon. So, and that stock, if you can eat 340-ish out of that 5.7, you'll be in pretty good shape. And again, that's, stock, stock with a tune, stock manifolds, that whole bit. Let's see. What is Brian saying? 32,000s. Don't know what you're talking about, buddy. Get me back up on that. 62 saying, yo, I'm seeing more Turbo 400 swamps and Demons, Red Eyes, and Hellcats. Why limit yourself with 3 speeds when you can build a Demon performance 2,000 horse unit and keep the drivability? Look, man, right now, the current record holder, the number 2 record holder, the number 1 record holder with stock supercharger is running a stock HP 90 and it runs 850s. So there you go. I don't know why. I'm not a Turbo 400 guy. I know that guys run them because they can withstand a lot of abuse. I mean, I get why, guys. It makes launching the car a little bit easier. I get all the reasons why, but when you swap an 8-speed for a Turbo 400, and you've made the commitment to turn your car into a race car at that point, then maybe I can understand it. And really, from this point of view too, if you frag a Turbo 400, it's super cheap to put another one back in the car by comparison. But the record holders are both running HPs. Or I should say, the fastest HP 90 cars are running 850s. Now, I know that there's somebody else in the outliers that are running Turbo 400s. Look, it's a go-kart at that point. It's a drag race only thing. It is a dragster at that point. Don't care what you say. Don't care what you think. That's what it is. And again, guys, I get back to this. At what point is it no longer the car that you bought? What's the thing about the boat where, there's also another parable about this where, your grandfather's axe or whatever, if you replace the head, but it's the same handle, is it still your grandfather's axe? If you replace the handle after a while and it has the other head on it, is it really still your? It's the same thing with the boat. I can't remember his thermometer's boat, whatever the guy was. Anyway, at what point do you get to with the car that it's not really the car anymore? Is it the transmission? Is it a fender? Is it a headliner? Is it body panels? Is it wheels and tires? What if you've replaced it with an aftermarket part designates that car as not the same car anymore? And you know, I don't know. It brings me back to when I was at Legion of Demons last year talking yards of shit because people were removing door cards and door speakers and doing all these other things to the demon, going after this record that I thought was hysterical that they were doing all of this to, because presumably that car was a one-seat car that was an as-delivered car. Not an as-delivered car and then gutted in the process. So anyway, I don't know. Sorry, I kind of squirrel. Anyway, I'm going off on tangent, but I think you know where I'm going with this. You know, more power to them if that's what they want to do. It's their car, their money, their prerogative. They can do whatever they want to do. But just know that coming into this, a lot of guys are going to look at it and think, well, yeah, it's a Turbo 400. So that's not even a Dodge part. So, I mean, is it different if it's an LS swapped car with an 8-speed automatic? Like, would that be okay too? Would you still call it the same thing? What about if it's an LS engine with a Ford transmission in a Dodge car? Would that still be the Hellcat that it was before? Would it still be the Charger? I'm not sure. What if it's a Coyote swapped GM 10-speed in a Charger, but it's got aftermarket fenders, trunk lid, roof, and hood with aftermarket wheels, tires, and brakes? Is it still a Charger? Where does that breakover point start? And when do we just start saying, look, if you replace anything, like any of these major components, it's just not that car anymore? I don't know. That's a topic of debate. It's kind of just a mind exercise. But, you know, my thing is, once you swap out a Turbo 400, it's a race car, and you just treat it like a race car, and it does race car stuff, and it gets there and back on a trailer. Uncle Sneakford's checking out. Smoking a 5 saying, howdy Mopar Fest, got thumbs up. Thank you much. Let's see. Smoking a 5 saying, finally made the live show. Late, but I'm here. Glad you're here, buddy. Let's see. H237, would it be better to run an E50 fuel mix in the winter? I would think starting would be easier when it's cold outside. It is, provided that you don't want to mess with the power that you're just, I don't know, basically giving up with the E85 if you've tuned and boosted accordingly for E85. So, I mean, there's that. Plus, when you think of it from that perspective, you know, I get a lot of the super guys run E50 because that's what their fuel system will manage right now. I understand that completely, and you can actually pick up a decent amount of power through that. But, I mean, yeah, you could run E50, but most guys, E85 guys, modern scenarios, if you're not driving the thing in like sub-winter, like sub-freezing conditions, they typically fire up. Where the guys that have a problem are typically the guys that are running real big injectors, trying to get the things to fire up. A lot of the import guys, a lot of the Subaru guys will have found that they run into cold start issues on 85. And most of the time it'll fire up, it'll cough, piss, moan, it'll shut down. You fire it back up, give it a little bit of throttle, and it'll hold its own idle after that. So it's more of an annoying thing than anything else. Racer X, y'all tell everybody I said what's up. Tell everybody, perform. Everybody tell Racer X what's up. Also tell Quick Break what's up. Saying, so if a guy wanted to get some help with his trans tune on his 1,000 horsepower Hellcat, how should he proceed? Just give me a holler tomorrow afternoon. I may be able to help you out with it then. A couple of things I need to take a look at. A couple of things we need to look at as well, as far as you downloading the latest version of the HP Tuner software. I'm going to need you to do that before I can do anything else. We're going to need to change some of your PIDs around that we're going to be logging, but that's what we're going to be up to. But give me a shout. We'll take a look at it. Quick Breaks in saying, what's up, brother man? We'll be checking my e-content here directly, and we'll pick up some Ignite before the rental. Very nice. Looking forward to that, as you may imagine. Brian saying, Racer X, get a tune from Forza Tuning on transmission. Smoking 05 saying, I got a Pikes Performance ECM and TCM tune and am loving it. Jimmy's asking, have you done the torque boxes on your Fox body? Yes, I have. She does have the battle boxes installed. And yeah, I happen to know, Brian, who Racer X will be getting his transmission soon. No, we'll take a look at it and see if there's any changes we can make. And like I say, I've got to dig around in your tune a little bit to see what we can find, but make sure you get me that log too. If you haven't, oh wait, did you even get a chance to log the car? I need to get a log to see where it's shifting at. Let's see. Yaga is saying, what's up, B? Staying mode blue is GT500. What a nightmare for a car guy. Have you ever blown up an engine? Yes, I have, as a matter of fact. No, more than one. And what recommendations to avoid that catastrophe? Don't do what I did. I've blown up all kinds of stuff. I've blown up Briggs & Stratton motors. I've blown up small block Fords. Blew up 6-cylinder in my grandfather's Dodge truck. What haven't I blown up? Didn't blow up my RC51. Didn't blow up my GSX-R 750. Yeah, so tips, don't get greedy. That's your first tip. Second tip is change out your solenoids if you're running nitrous. See, I give you guys advice based on the stuff that I've done. Sometimes it's not coming from a place of wisdom. It's coming from a place of experience. And a lot of times wisdom is just, I don't know, what you learn from stupidity and, the stories that come of it. Nobody ever wants to hear about your wins. Nobody can relate with wins. Wins don't make you laugh. It's when you blow shit sky high, ventilate. Oh, the lightning ventilated that block out of both sides of the block. No, it's, comedy is tragedy plus time, not winning plus time. That's there. So anyway, what haven't I blown up? But I've learned what not to do. And so a lot of it has to do with don't get greedy. Check your equipment. Don't run old nitrous solenoids. Check your fuel. Make sure you're data logging. That's the other thing. Make sure that you're not running around with something that is already kind of broke. Nut and bolt cars, often if you're beating on them, make sure you maintain them as hard as you are running them. All of those things will help the catastrophes from being more numerous than they need to be. So, and hey, recently I blew up the clutch in this thing, so maybe that kind of counts. But yeah, it sucks about staying mode in the GT500. I hate to hear about anybody blowing their stuff up, man. I hate to hear that. Let's see. Non-X is saying, glad to see you. Glad to see you too. I've got one fuel injector that had a saturation around it and caused the engine to shut off. I put the gray clip on top and it seems to run good. Would you look deeper or keep running? Yeah, I would not just call that good, man. I would check that out and see what's going on. You're saying it had saturation around it and it caused the engine to shut off. One injector won't cause it to shut off. The injector's gone bad, or if it's got an issue with its spray pattern, it can make that one cylinder just suck. But no, I would definitely check that out. If you've got that issue with that injector, I don't know how many miles you've got on it or what fuel you've been running, but I would say that you probably could have a bad set of injectors, or if nothing else, a very unbalanced set of injectors. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like, if something else is going on there, I would check that out. Oh, Kevin's asking, hey, what I meant was, what is the most rear-wheel horsepower you can get throwing the full bolt-on treatment at the RT with the stock cam? Should I have worded it better? Well, no, not really. I mean, it still kind of goes along with that. I mean, if you're running the stock cam, that's going to be your limiting factor. what's the most rear wheel horsepower you can get out of it? Like I say, I mean, I wouldn't look for much more than 360. I know that with one of my camshafts, the Dr. Diff has been getting 400 wheel horsepower out of the trucks with the Joker cam. So there's that. I don't know if you consider a cam a bolt-on. I really don't, because, well, you're not bolting it on, you're bolting it in, not to mention you're removing the heads. So there's that. But, you know, again, this is on a Mustang dyno. You know, I would say 360-ish with a stock cam is about the most I would try to look at. If you can eke a little bit more out of that with like a, well, like a 6.4 manifold, or it's intake manifold, by the way. Long tubes, slightly larger throttle body, a cleaned up intake at that. A very well optimized tune on some really good fuel, you'll be in good shape. You know, I think you'll be fine at that number. Frank's asking, what's the difference between a supercharger and a pro charger? The thing is that supercharging, pro charging, and all these things start to get a little bit conflated. The names start to kind of get mixed around. So let's go back to World War II. Oh, God, here he goes. Okay, look, I got to do this, guys, so just bear with me. I got to walk him through terminology. Back then, all of those supercharged engines were what's known as either a supercharger, which was a centrifugal supercharger, not a Roots blower, called blower because they were used in air pumps and things like that. But the turbos were called turbo superchargers or turbo supercharging. So anything that is supercharging the engine would be a supercharger. It could be a turbo supercharger, centrifugal supercharger, Roots supercharger. You are charging the engine above what the normal atmospheric pressure would allow. In other words, supercharging the engine. But blower gets played around a little bit. It's all just based on the housing itself. A turbo and a centrifugal supercharger have an extremely similar compressor side. Remember, our over-under body count is 2 on Skeeters. If this thing comes anywhere near me, we're going to cover the number. The compressor side is very similar. The drive mechanism is what's different. Obviously, turbos run off of exhaust gas. The centrifugal supercharger or pro charger, which is the same thing, it's just a centrifugal supercharger. Pro charger is the name. It's not a designation of forced induction like turbocharger. Is just a name of a type of supercharging. It describes a supercharger that uses exhaust gas. Centrifugal supercharger means it is a centrifugal compressor driven off of the engine, and a positive displacement supercharger is a supercharger that's run off of the front of the engine. In other words, it's crank driven, or it could be gear driven. There's all kinds of different configurations for these things going back in the day. Shaft driven in some cases, believe it or not. But that's where all these terminologies come from. Was they got really thrown around in the 20s with the different types of superchargers that were used back in like what would have been like some of the Formula One type racing back then. We had 4 cylinders with basically these big, inefficient as hell, but centrifugal superchargers, Root superchargers that were driven off the front of the crank. You've seen those maybe before with some of the old street rods. The Roots type stuff. Really, the big difference comes in when people say, so supercharging is just cramming more air into the thing. But like a Roots blower, this is where, again, where blowers come into play. Is it a blower? Is it a supercharger? Don't get wrapped up in all the terminology. But those get they got their start, that design got its start as an air compressor for mine shafts, and it's a positive displacement. So every time the thing turns, you get a pre-measured, so to speak, amount of air to come out of it. And the faster you turn it, the more that pre-measured amount comes out. That's different because it's pumping big gulps of air into the engine at once. So again, just kind of working you through the different types of supercharging. But when it comes to, what the difference is between, a supercharger and a procharger is only the name of a centrifugal type of a supercharger. Smoking a 5 saying, I ran E85 on my DSM in 10-degree winters and had to add a ton of cranking fuel to get it to fire, but it would fire. Absolutely. DSMs are fun too. Let's see. Racetrack saying, sounds good, brother. I didn't get a log, got the fist bump. I like it. Saying, didn't get a log. Unfortunately, the cable pulled out on the launch. That sucks, man. Yeah, just hit me up, man. Abu's asking, so what size 555s were you running on the rear, on what size rims, and any mods to wheel on Revlon? So 305 3520 is the size tire that I run on the back of Revlon in the street, in her street gear. And it's on a 10.5-inch wide wheel, which is the customary size for the replica wheels, like the Demon reps that are on Revlon, or the slingshot reps, things of that nature. Most guys go with those 10.5-inch wide wheels. The original 555s fit real nicely on 10.5-inch wide wheels. They're nice and flush, and they look really nice and clean. The Tri-5 R2s are a little bit wider, and I criticized them quite a bit just for them being kind of busy. The sidewalls are a lot busier than the Mickey Thompson, which is another good tire, 305 3520 on the 10.5-inch wide tire. Nice clean look, not a lot of writing or graphics or anything like that. Tri-5s are the same way. Tri-5s are a real pretty looking tire. They're nice, clean, understated looking tire for those that not only want performance, but they're also looking for that aesthetic. Whereas the R2s, basically, I'll just kind of shrink it down to the R2s are the Tri-5 R2, a little bit busier, but the weird thing about them is that they do spec a little bit wider. They're like a small 315 as opposed to a true 305, which can cause a little bit of an issue with rubbing on the inner fender well. But an adjustment to the inner fender well will take care of that. So it's really not that big of a deal. And really, to be honest, man, since I put the Demon reps on the car, I don't even notice the busyness of those tires. So maybe it was just the way that, I saw those tires on the slingshots. And I've even said that in the videos before, where the slingshots didn't have any kind of lip whatsoever, and so the tire just stuck out there. Whereas the Demon replicas have a little bit of a lip to them, and it's just a better looking tire, a better looking wheel and tire combination as a whole. It's a hell of a lot more balanced on that old school body type also. Should have come from the factory with that wheel and tire in that staggered setup. And I know they did sort of with the Demon, but you see what I'm saying. Let's see. Smoking 05 saying, good judgment is based off experience. Experience is based off of bad judgment. True that. Jimmy saying, I may or may not have thrown a few rods through the block in some 301 Pontiacs and 79 Formula Firebird before putting a 403 in it. I understand that completely. Real Counterfeit saying, max full horsepower for 93, no meth for your red eye. I'll be real honest with you, buddy. I wouldn't want to see more than 750 on a Mustang dyno. 7 1/4 on a Mustang dyno is pretty good. It gives you a little bit of a pretty good safety margin. Dyno jet numbers, you're going to kick that to maybe 780, 790. But 750 would be the utmost total maximum. I wouldn't even go that high, if I'm being honest. And if I'm being really blunt with you, anything over 700 is kind of asking a lot. I'll give you a good example. When with just like a 285 upper car, with a stock lower on a Mustang dyno, at least the one at Pikes, which is kind of a little bit stingy, but that setup makes about 7.25 to the rear wheels. And it's not a true 93 octane setup. It's 93 octane with some Torco, okay? So just know that coming into it. A little bit of boostane, a little bit of Torco is going to have to be thrown in the mix just to add a little bit of a safety margin, get that octane up to a good and honest, I should say, 96, 97 for your octane rating. So, if you're going straight 93, real number, 700. Same for the Hellcats. I really wouldn't want to drive any more than that through the car. It's just, to me, it's just not really worth it. Plus, with you being a red eye, you're going to run into some other issues along the way with some thermal considerations that the Hellcat guys just simply don't have to mess with. You've got the luxury of having a bigger supercharger, which will make you get out of the hole a little bit quicker. What I've told everybody that's even had a question about what's the difference between a red eye and a Hellcat, the red eye feels like you're driving an old muscle car with a big block, by comparison to the Hellcat, where the Hellcat just wails on the big end. So it's kind of weird talking about a car like the Hellcat wailing on the big end when you compare it to anything, but it's true when it comes to the red eye. So again, overdriving the supercharger by much more than what you're driving it now isn't going to pay big dividends. Again, it's more of a heat issue than anything else. So keep it around 700 horsepower and you'll be in a real nice, just the bellissimo part of your for what 93 octane based on the weight of your vehicle will actually be able to manage. Let's see. Hilton Mode's asking, how much torque do you lose with the Joker cam? You don't lose any torque, you just shift it. Oh, we got son of a bitch. Did I get him? Did I get him? Where'd he go? Anyway, no, you'll actually shift it up a little bit. You'll lose a little bit of tip-in torque, but not by much. And there's some adjusting in the cam that you can make that'll help to pick up for some of that. So it'll be peakier, obviously. But in terms of actual torque, that truck didn't lose a whole lot. And shift points can be somewhere around 65, 67. Frank Ellis saying, thank you. Thank you, Frank. Real Counterfeit Cash saying, not worth modding at all then. Not so much. Saying you get 7 stock. Maybe on a dyno jet you do, but not on a Mustang dyno. I'm basing these numbers off of a Mustang dyno. Every one that I have seen on the Mustang dyno has made between 630 and 650 to the rear wheels. So by that standard, a tune, maybe a little bit of a pulley, but that's about as far as I would honestly take it. But yeah, it puts it like this, Demons, every Demon that I had on the dyno made 650, 653, 658. That was, it was like clockwork on 93 octane. So, and that's what the red eyes make on 93 octane, typically somewhere around that number. So, again, 6.25, 630, 640, somewhere around in that range. So again, like I say, I wouldn't, I just really wouldn't go much more than that. Again, a little bit of a tune. Obviously, man, look, don't worry about, here's the thing. Don't worry about engine power. You got plenty of power coming into this. You can tune it, get a little bit of power. Like I said, maybe a small pulley upgrade. You'll be in good shape there. Get the thing to 700 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. Again, that's like 750-ish on a dyno jet, if that's what you're used to running on. But focus more on the trans tune and you'll pick up quite a bit there for sure. Let's see. Xcash is saying, my dream car is a 69 Charger with a 426 Hemi EFI carb, 6-speed and Viper brakes with torque thrust rims. Pretty much the same one the guy has on Drive TV. Nice one. That would be nice, by the way. Real Counterfeit Cash saying, thanks, brother. Good info. Absolutely. Hopefully it helps you out. Look, I don't like seeing guys with red eyes go batshit crazy with their cars. You end up chasing. There are some heat issues that those cars have because of the larger supercharger. Every one that I've driven, I've loved. I love those cars in stock form. The tune itself is shy by comparison to a Hellcat. I'll be real honest with you. The Hellcat tune is more aggressive, but it's also not dealing with the discharge temps that the Red Eyes and the Demons are dealing with. So where the Red Eye does a great job is out of the hole. That thing will out 60 foot pretty much everything at the drag strip, especially if it drove there under its own power. And that's stock. A 309 Red Eye on a drag pack is a low 150 60 foot just waiting to happen. And that's on 93 octane with the stock too. I mean, those things just come out of the hole like a freaking banshee. So definitely a lot of fun to drive. But again, the number also applies to the Hellcat too. It's a limitation of 93 octane based on the cylinder pressures that you're dealing with, the amount of weight that you're dealing with, the amount of inertia that you have to overcome. All of that is part of why you can't really get away with, well, you can get away with less, I guess is what I'm trying to get at, with one of these Mopars, again, just mainly because of the weight and the amount of dwell time that you have with that ultra high cylinder pressure. So, and there's some timing issues that come into play too, but anyway, you get the idea. Real Counter saying, my dream is the 1,000 cubic inch motor stuffed in anything. Smotify saying, trying to data log in negative DA and cold temps, no traction, and hit 6,600 on the 2.3 shift to my 392. Can that damage push rods and valve train? Not at 6,600. Not if it only happens once or twice. Typically, no. There's guys with, give you an idea, there's guys with Hellcats that typically will turn those to 7,000 RPM regularly. A lot of guys have turned them to 6,800, 6,900 over and over and over and over and over and over again. Every once in a while, it probably not going to hurt anything. But if you're beating on it regularly at that point, it can sting you. But if it's just like, oh goodness, and you got out of it, probably didn't hurt anything at all. You know, as far as piston speed, everything else goes, like I said, no, 392's doing good in that respect. So no, don't worry about it. Just don't go out and try to do it over and over again. But 65, 6,600 RPM isn't nothing. It's, you know, and again, you know, even $7,000 isn't really over stressing it. $7,000 is really more of a push rod issue at that point and a spring issue because you start screwing around with valve control. And the issue is these Hemis have these big ass valves and they're heavy. That's what'll end up stinging you. It's why if you're, you know, planning on spinning it to 7,000 RPM, you need push rods and springs, even if you're running the stock cam. Smote5 saying, yeah, I pedaled the throttle 3 times. It kept spinning. I get that 100%. James checking in say, hey, Mason, good to see you. I'm still working on the 392 swap, my Magnum RT, been kind of slow going though. Got any recommendations for a cam kit? Trying to keep the VVT, run nitrous and meth. Give Dr. Diff a shout. Get you hooked up, man. Xcash saying, I'm never turning my rev limiter off. So I've got, the funny thing about Hellcats is that you have to have significantly elevated rev limiters, especially when you get into modified cars, to keep them from scaring the living hell out of the predictive shift algorithm. But yeah, no, you never turn them off ever. And you don't ever want them to consistently run over, you know, 69, 7, 71 for sure. 7 is like the cringe number. 68, you're like, I don't like that, but not necessarily too bad. 65, it's like that's nothing. That's cakewalk. But everything's always got a fine line, and there's a little bit of gray area between 65 and 7,000 RPM. 7,000 RPM is definitely the note. In fact, the 66 to 7,000 RPM is kind of like the yellow, so you're good, and then I don't know, and then definitely don't go above 7 if you can't get around it. Bob Barker's asking, should I buy a Prius to pick up women? Yeah, if you're an Uber driver, that's one way to pick up chicks in a Prius. And guys, with that, I just noticed we are checking in over 2 hours. I've got to wrap this up. So thank y'all very much for everybody that was hanging out tonight. Really do appreciate you. Couldn't do this without you. And with that, I'm going to sign off. So if you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep it shiny side up. Keep wearing your mask, not for yourself, then for others. Love each and every one of y'all. Stay safe out there. And I will catch y'all on the next one. That is a wrap. Adios.